My name is Samuel Martin, and I will be talking tonight about police community interaction. A little bit about myself. I went to Lakeland University. This is a small Division III private school in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. There, I received my bachelor's in criminal justice along with psychology. So, a topic in which it includes a criminal justice approach along with the psyche of police officers fits very well with me due to the fact that I have spent some time working in a police department along with my father spending 32 years as an officer. Now, according to Nix and Wolf, there's a significant amount of number of interactions between police and the community within the last several years dropping. It is also shown in studies done by the New York Police Department released within last year that the amount of arrest officers are making has decreased as well. Some of this has to do with the increase of social media and portable cameras. Um, Many are aware of going on their Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, and looking and finding police shoots person or police officer uses force on person. And because these videos go out and are not always well rounded or use the whole scene in the video, police officers are put on administrative leave or lose their job or even worse, have to be forced out of their job and can never be police officers ever again. And really, what the tipping point of this was, and what caused this to go over the top, um, was really the events that happened in Ferguson, Missouri. Moving forward, we have the Ferguson effect. What really, what really the Ferguson effect surrounds itself is over the killing of Michael Brown. Michael Brown was an African American teenage male that had stolen some items from a convenience store in Ferguson, Missouri. And when he was approached by police officers after the call went out, he got into an altercation with an officer and tried to grab the officer's gun, and the officer shot and killed uh, Michael Brown. Fast forward a couple months after a hearing, it was found that the officer was not guilty of any crimes and had done his job within the line of duty. And because of this, on August 9th, 2014, there was a riot that broke out within the city. It lasted over 3 days, causing millions of dollars of damage to the city and its infrastructure. The National Guard had to be called in. The police had to take a military approach with SWAT teams and heavy armored cars. And like I previously mentioned, it only lasted 3 days, but it resulted in one death and a countless amount of injuries as well. Now, the true purpose and the true meaning of this presentation is based off of information and an overall review of the research paper by Wolf and Nix titled The Ferguson Effect. It was released in 2016. It contains a study that was done shortly after the Ferguson riots in 2015. And really, what the paper is, because it is not truly proven or been proven several times, is it's a theory that the scare or the fear of being filmed is causing officers not to interact with civilians. So it's not just being filmed while they're doing their jobs. It's not having an eye on them at all times because officers carry body cameras, and many officers will say that body cameras actually backs them up. It proves that they didn't do anything wrong, and they're pro body cameras. But why? What they're scared of is cameras that come from unreliable sources, video that comes from unreliable sources that catches them being physical or using force with a civilian that comes out in the media and then forces them to lose their job when they haven't done anything wrong in the first place. So the research was conducted mainly on the East Coast amongst police departments, and what it was first off a study of what officers um, wrote down or kept track of for all their different interactions with civilians, because many departments officers do need to keep track of this um, to show city councils the need for more funding, or it helps with the officers that are on the next shift because they then can keep track of an investigation or keep up to date on other investigations. And then along with this, it had a small interview with officers asking them, with a few interviews with officers asking them how they felt in certain situations and how they approached different um, what are called scenes. Moving forward, we have the research method of this study. As I previously mentioned, it was a data study of interactions of select police departments up and down the East Coast, mainly being Massachusetts, Virginia, New York, states like that. Then there was interviews with select and even fewer select departments and officers of those that they collected the data from, asking them what their first thoughts were as they went into a scenes, or what scenes they tried to stay away from, or did they ever find themselves not clicking or signing into a call because they wanted to avoid it for fear that it might cause them to use force or an altercation might occur. And then finally, to determine um, to back up their theory of what the Ferguson effect is and how it's affecting officers, they then compared this data to past years and past decades, and it did show that officers had been interacting with um, civilians not just less and less into the results of this study. As I mentioned with the data, it was found that officers were not only just not interacting at a quote unquote normal rate of interaction, they also were not arresting at the same rates as previously mentioned. The city of New York uh, has shown a grave or a continual decrease in arrest numbers over the past several years. The interviews with the officers as well showed very similar answers and reasons for not getting out of squad cars, and that being the fear of having to use force, or the fear of going into a situation where things could easily get out of control, whether it was the setting, the the time of day, or most importantly, the type of person they were dealing with, typically someone with a violent or felony background. And then there was the field study conducted by patrolmen in which they followed around these with every good study, there are always criticisms. First, the population of the study. This is only on the East Coast, and that has been mentioned several times for that reason. Uh, Things could be different by region. Things could be different in the Midwest compared to the East Coast. It could be worse. It could be better. There's many different things. Ferguson happened in Missouri in the Southeast, where again this was in the Northeast. Um, there's another criticism that they didn't do a field study. They didn't get out there and see officers face to face in the trenches with the officers and seeing if, is this just something that's being spoken about, theorized about? Are the officers giving different answers while they're in the interview, vice versa, when they're really doing their job? So it could be a lot stronger if this is true. Lack of transparency. There isn't really uh, a deeper understanding of the research. What was given from in the article was what was given as a face value. The article did not go deeper into how they did the research. It kind of just laid it out black and white. Here it was, and it didn't really give a very strong insight to what the officers were saying or how their research went. And then it was a slippery slope idea that this one A led to B, and there's a bit of open ground there and open a lot of areas where um, critiques can be made that maybe it isn't just this. Maybe there's something that happens between the effect and the officer not wanting to get out of their squad cars. A few solutions that were found in research outside of the Ferguson Effect article comes up with tour diaries. Tour diaries are diaries that officers turn in or have to give at the end of the night about who they made contact with every time they got out of the car, what they did, what time, people involved. A lot of times these are just kind of done, and the officers look at them, and administration never really do anything about it. And that comes to the next point, the revamp involvement of administration. Instead of the diaries just being something that the patrolmen use, administrators should be using these more to see what officers are getting out during the night. Should they be doing more? Should they be not hanging out in the same area? Should they be expanding themselves more to rougher neighborhoods or minority neighborhoods that they probably are trying to avoid? These are things that administrations can see and determine and keep a closer eye on if they're looking at tour diaries. And finally, and the most important solution to this problem, is training of community policing. Community policing is taught in many college programs, criminal justice programs, and even in some academies, but it's never really trained. It's never really saying like these are different things you can do. These are how you act with these communities. These are how you act with the economically uh, poor communities. These are how you uh, act with the minority communities. These kind of things are never spoken to officers or taught to officers very strongly. And if they were, it could make a giant difference in an officer's amount that they get out and interact with the community. And finally, the conclusion and final part of this presentation. Historical events can ripple into society. The Ferguson riots was a historical event that will go down in U.S. history that caused a domino effect to affect policing and everyday life for Americans. Police departments have not been holding officers to standards. It's quite obvious that police officers are not doing their jobs, unfortunately, and it's not all on them. It is some of it falls onto the media, but it is up to the departments to counteract this and the administrators to make sure that their officers are going out and interacting with the community. And finally, the strongest way to change this effect is training officers in community policing. If if community policing and its theories and its ideas are pressed upon officers at an early point in their career, they're more and more likely to use these and believe these as truths instead of just ideas and suggestions. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And here are a few of my references that I used for this presentation and paper to come.